All right, so 3 units, 750 megawatts each, and that's important. You probably can't see this little visual down here, but there are 2 owners, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power and NV Energy, and combined, their interest totals nearly 750 megawatts. That's going to be important later, so I ask you to hang on to that little fact while I move through the rest of these factoids. Bill mentioned it is operated by the Salt River Project on behalf of 6 different owners. In a fairly unique arrangement, the Bureau of Reclamation participates in the plant, is in fact the largest participant in the plant. So a fairly unique situation in that the plant is located on tribal land, the Navajo Nation, and we do have a federal owner. And so that makes the situation a little more, this power plant a little bit more unique. There are 520 employees at the facility, and more than 85% of them are Navajo. And finally, to make it even more, that delivers or provides 90% of the power for CAP for their pumps to provide water to Central Arizona. So I don't believe there's any other power plant like this in the country. And I think you are all familiar with this, but let me, because you're here tonight, so you're interested in it, but let me just remind you, kind of refresh your recollection as to where we are. EPA started the process of looking at all of the power plants in the West to look at their regional haze implications. They had been studying Navajo Generating Station for quite some time, and in February they issued their BART proposal. BART stands for Best Available Retrofit Technology. And in their proposal, they proposed that BART would equal the installation of 3 SCRs, so an SCR on each unit by 2018 or within 5 years. But they also, recognizing the uniqueness of this particular power plant, they came up with an alternative. And in 2009 through 2011, the owners of NGS voluntarily installed something called low NOx burners. And that pollution control technology reduces NOx by about 40 to 45%. So we did that voluntarily. We thought that that was going to be BART. So the plant was in some outages, and we thought, well, we'll take advantage of those outages and we'll install this early. EPA, in their proposal, recognized that early installation and said, you know what, we'll give you credit, if you will, for that installation. We'll acknowledge that you did that, and we'll extend the installation, the time period for the installation of SCRs to 2021, 2022, and 2023. But importantly, they also said, we invite members of the public, interested stakeholders to come up with your own solution here. But it must be better than BART. It must result in fewer emissions of NOx in the same time period. It must be better than BART, but feel free to provide that alternative to us, and we'll take a look at it. Many people have wondered, why wasn't the EPA alternative enough? Why wasn't 21, 22, and 23 enough? And this slide, although it is horribly busy, and I'm imagining that most of the folks in the audience can't really read what this says. Is that true? Can you even read the writing on here?
Yeah, I can read it.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, it's very busy. And I might be asking too much if this has a pointer. Oh, it does. Excellent. All right, I mentioned to you that the power plant's located on tribal land and that we have federal participation in the power plant. And as a result, we'll need to complete a very comprehensive NEPA process, National Environmental Protection Policy. A NEPA process. It will be long and it will be involved. 10 different federal agencies will be involved, 15 different tribes, and a review of 20 different actions. One of those actions is the renewal of the lease. Lease has a 25-year renewal clause, which comes into play in 2019. We have negotiated that renewal with the Navajo tribe. Now the federal government is going to need to approve that. We think that NEPA process is probably going to take at least to 2018 to get completed, and that's probably a tad optimistic. If if the owners, and this is an important point, so I just want to make sure everybody understands this point, because people sometimes get upset when they hear me say this. So if EPA were to require us, the owners, to install pollution control equipment, the SCRs, which will cost about $560 million, if we're required to do that before 2018, before we have the NEPA process complete, we believe that the owners would decide to close the plant. Because we wouldn't know, we would be asked to make this huge investment in the power plant without knowing that it's going to continue beyond 2018, so we wouldn't be able to amortize that investment beyond 2018. It's a little like being a renter in an apartment and wanting to make some renovations, but not knowing whether your lease is going to be extended, right? Are you going to, make a $10,000 a bunch of improvements without knowing that you're going to be able to lease the apartment beyond the first of the year? Probably not. It's the same idea. So does everybody follow? Does everybody understand that major piece? Because that's a really important component. All right. So because of the concerns about timing and the need to get some additional time, we formed SRP, working with other stakeholders, formed what we call the technical work group. These are the members of the group. Many of them are here tonight. The Central Arizona Water Conservation District, the Environmental Defense Fund, the Gila River Indian Community. They're the largest off-taker of CAP water. The Navajo Nation, of course. SRP, the Sierra Club, and you'll see the note there that they started with the process, but they withdrew midway through the process. The U.S. Department of Interior, the Bureau of Reclamation, and then finally Western Resource Advocates. Yes?
What was the Hopi tribal group?
We tried to make sure that everybody at the table was represented in some way, and we realized that there were lots and lots of folks who wanted to be at this table, but ultimately we decided that because the Navajos had such a major interest in the plant, it's located on their land, that they would certainly be able to represent many of the views of the Hopi, and that as soon as we got something. Let me just back up and say that the folks around the table, you see that there were 7 groups. This process started in 2010, and at that point there were, Bill actually facilitated a group that had about 100 different representatives. Many of you probably participated in that. We knew that at the end of the day, we weren't going, given the short amount of time, we were not going to be able to get to a final conclusion if we included 100 people. So we made some choices about who could be at the table. I know that people are disappointed that not everybody could be at the table, but we certainly couldn't allow 100 folks or so. Why not?
Well, let me say this. So you're saying the Hopi tribe is not a stakeholder, even though we sell coal to that place. How do you define that as not a stakeholder?
You certainly are. Hopi tribe is definitely a stakeholder, but so were the 100 people that participated in the stakeholder process.
Coal. That's why I'm emphasizing.
Yeah, no, I
Hopi
understand.
tribe sells coal, so.
Absolutely, and you'll note that Peabody wasn't at the table either.
Well, I'm not worried about Peabody.
I understand that, but there are a lot of. I fully admit there are a lot of folks who wanted to be at the table. Absolutely, and they are valuable stakeholders, and we need to hear and understand their concerns. We couldn't have everybody at the table, or it wouldn't be productive.
We're going to talk about this very issue later. That is the composition of the work group. But I think we need to get on with the discussion, and we'll circle back to this so that we can hear a number of perspectives about who participated in the discussion and who did not.
Well, since Department of Interior, who is trustee of the Hopi tribe, why are they allowing this to happen? We are stakeholders. I want an answer to that. Why we were not included.
And we will talk about that hear these conversations, including from the Department of Interior, who's here this evening.
The group met for about 4 months. We came up with 2 different alternatives. The TWIG agreement is actually a very large agreement, and there are many different components to it. BART is just one section of it, and my colleague, Dave Colombo, can talk a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about the other commitments that the Department of Interior made in this agreement, but I'm here to talk about the BART proposal. So under Alternative A, which we think is by far and away the most likely alternative here, if certain ownership changes occur, meaning if LA and NV Energy exit the plant, we will shut down 1 unit at the end of 2019, and we will install SCRs or the equivalent technology by no later than the end of 2030. If something else occurs, if for some reason LA doesn't exit or NV Energy doesn't exit, then we will we will ensure that there are NOx reductions equivalent to the shutdown of the unit between 2020 and 2030, and we will submit annual operating plans with potential future operating scenarios each year, explaining to EPA how we will ensure that we will get those requisite NOx reductions. That's a little bit complicated, so the easiest way to do is to kind of show it visually. This is EPA's BART proposal. So as you can see, this is the installation of 3 SCRs in 2018, and then this is the emission profile from 2018 to 2044. If you add up all of the NOx emissions from 2009 to 2044, you end up with 480,000 tons, 480,450 tons of NOx that would be emitted during that time period. This is alternative A. This is what the emissions profile would look like under that alternative. Oops, back up, sorry. Here you can see EPA's alternative. This is what the emissions profile looks like today. This is the installation of the low NOx burners that I mentioned to you in 2009 through 2011. You see a big step down here at the end of 2019 to 2020, where we closed down one unit. And then in 2030, you see the installation of the other 2 SCRs, and then the emissions profile through 2044. Importantly, if you look up here in the big box, this is the EPA number of NOx tons that are going to be emitted in that time period. Alternative A is better than BART because ultimately we will be emitting fewer tons of NOx in this time period. This is alternative B. It's a little more complicated. Again, you see the installation of the low NOx burners. This box, this big orange box, really shows that from this time period, from 2020 to 2030, we must reduce emissions from this point to this point. And we can do that through seasonal curtailments. We can do that through early retirements. You could do it through efficiency improvements. There are lots of different options that we could use to ensure that we reduce NOx by the equivalent of 1 unit. And again, if you look up in the box, you see that alternative B is also better than EPA's BART. It results in fewer tons of NOx being emitted during that time period. We believe that the TWIG alternative is really the best path forward for the plant. We think that it will ensure the continued operation of NGS. It provides times to resolve these outstanding uncertainties. We don't know what the ownership is going to look like. We have to negotiate a new coal supply agreement. We have to complete the lease. The owners need to approve the lease. We have to complete the NEPA process. And it maintains Arizona's utility interests in the plant. In addition to SRP, APS and TEP are also owners of the plant, and CAP's interest, obviously through the Bureau, is all kept virtually the same. Do you want to take questions, or do you want to wait?
Would you ask?
Oh, go ahead.
Were any of these techniques tried early on to see that they really
Yes, SCR is proven technology, so we know that.
Shutting down a unit or something for a while, is that too much that you can't shut it down and bring it back up? You were saying that you kind of shut down to put on those
The loaders, yeah.
credits and all that.
Yeah.
Like doing that to measure the emissions and see how much it drops.
Yes, after the installation of the low NOx burners, our emissions of NOx have been reduced by about 45%. So after we took the units down and installed them.
Somewhere?
Yes. Yeah, we reported to EPA and we have it available. So in September, we submitted the TWIG agreement, which contained these alternatives in July to EPA. EPA took a look at those different alternatives, looked at the TWIG alternative A and alternative B, and in September issued a supplemental rule. So in addition to their initial proposal and their alternative, they proposed as a supplemental proposal the TWIG alternative. They have just been in town. How many of you went to the EPA comment periods? They had them in Page and Litchi, Phoenix, yeah. And so they were seeking public comment on their two alternatives as well as the TWIG alternative, which they have suggested as a supplemental proposal. For the most part, the EPA proposal adopts the TWIG alternative. In large part, there are a couple differences that we need some clarification. The public comment sessions were completed last week, and then written comments are due January 6th. So the next steps, after the written comments are completed in January 6th, we'll at some point get a final rule from EPA. We will then have to also complete the environmental impact statement that I mentioned to you. We have to negotiate a new coal supply agreement with Peabody Coal Company. We also have to resolve these ownership issues so that we can facilitate the transition of NV Energy and